This will be an introductory beginner tutorial to drawing in Rhino with the aim of producing laser cuttable vectors. So in this case, we are going to double click on the top viewport banner here. That will maximize the viewport. In here, we could either with the scroll wheel zoom out or zoom in. But first we're going to create a rectangle. So we type rectangle, and either you can type the whole command, or you can, as soon as it's autofills, so to say, you can press enter or space to just enter or execute the command. And then first corner, in this case, we are going to use the origin where the X and Y axes meet as our starting point for the rectangle. So we can type 0. 0 is the same as 0, 0, 0. 0 in all three axes, that is 0, the origin, and enter or space to confirm. The length of this should be 653. So I'll just input that, 653. And as long as you're working in millimeters, as you see here with the units, then what you input here will be millimeters. If you are working in meters, what you input here will be in meters. But now we're working in millimeters. All right, having input 653, we should press enter or space to confirm. And then for the width, that's 154 millimeters. And then enter. And now, since we were fairly zoomed in the viewport here, the object itself, if you click and drag from right to left, you will select anything and everything that is at least partly included in the selection window. And as you see here, it continues beyond the extents of the viewport as it is zoomed in right now. Either we could zoom out manually, like this with the scroll wheel, or we could type the command zoom to, in this case we already have the object selected, so we can zoom to selected, that is ZS, zoom to selected. If we would not have the object selected, as if we click in the void here, and then zoom in again here in the void, then we could type ZE, zoom to extents, and that will make sure that all objects that are visible in the viewport zoom. So zoom to extents, and we have the same result. And right now we have a very simple layer structure. We only have the default layer. I want to create a new layer, so I click new layer here. I will name this layer border. And then I will select this object. Again, you can click and drag from right to left, and that will select everything and anything that is included in the window, in the selection window, or you could simply click it. The main point is that you select it, so that you have it selected, right click on the layer and change object layer. Now this object that we created, this curve, this rectangle, it is now residing in the border layer. We can hide it and we see that it disappears. But it does not disappear, it only disappears from view. It is still there. You could also lock it by clicking the keypad icon there. If you lock it, then you cannot select it or click and drag it like that. And I'll unlock it again. I'll create a line by typing line. And then I'll make sure that snapping is on, this Osnap option there. If you make sure that Osnap is active, then you can specify at which sort of geometrical property that the snapping should adhere to. So in this case, endpoints, point points, midpoints, center points, intersection points, perpendicular points, and vertices. So with the line command already executed, I'll click this first point here. It should be this end or intersection point. And then I'll simply click this one again. Then either I can click here and make sure that I select, that is highlighted here in this sort of purple-esque hue, highlight or that I select the correct recently selected, recently generated objects, or I can click escape here, and then simply type SelLast, and that will select the lastly generated objects like this. If I click and drag the right mouse button key, I can pan the view here. To make sure that this Gumball icon is active, you can click to toggle the Gumball option here. Very good. And in this case, I want to make sure the edge of the border here, it should be 43 millimeters to the inside of that. So in this case, since you see that the red arrow, it points here to the right in the view. So if we click this arrow, and type -43. It will move the objects in the negative direction, so to say, as you see, to the left. Very good. And this can be in a new layer, so I'll click the new layer button there, and this can be called inner border. And then with this still selected, I'll right mouse button click and change object layer. Very good. Now this is in inner border layer. On the other side, it should be the same, and since it should be the same, we can actually mirror this from the center point of this. This rectangle has, of course, a center point. If we mirror this object, with regards to the center point, then it always gets 43 millimeters from that side as well. So we can select this line that we have generated, and then we can type the command mirror. And then having the mirror command active, we'll make sure that the copy toggleable option here is toggled to yes. And then we can make sure, having Osnap on, and as well as the center point here, then we can take the center of the rectangle, click that, so that is the first reference point, and then if you click Ortho here, then you toggle it so there's only 90 degrees angular increments. Very good. So now you see here that you have a preview of it, where it is mirrored correctly. If you click, then you get it properly mirrored. Very good. Since you mirrored the object, then it should have the same layer applied to it. Very good, so we don't need to change that. If we'll do another line here, so line, space or enter to confirm, and from this end or intersection point to this end or intersection point, SelLast to select the lastly generated objects. And this should be, let's see, the inner edge, so it should be 30 millimeters from that border there. So I click on the green arrow, signifying the y-axis movement, and we'll move that -30. Very good. This is in the default layer. With it still selected, we can right mouse button click on inner border and change object layer. Very good. The outer edge here, it does not have the same offset distance as the other one, so we'll create this separately. Line from endpoint to endpoint, SelLast. Now we have it selected. It should be 13 millimeter from the outer rim here. So I'll click the green arrow here and 13 millimeters. Now, having all of these inner borders generated, we could trim the outsides of these and make sure that we only have the inner border rectangle left. So having selected all of these, we can type trim, and then we can simply click on the outer edges of it, and that trims away what is outside of the nearest intersection. Very good. Space or enter to confirm. Now, these are still 4 open curves. If we want, we can join these to one rectangle. So let's join this. Very good. One closed curve. And that is our inner border. Now, we want to create circles that encompass as much area as possible within the inner border here. So we'll type circle, and then we can make sure to, instead of choosing the center of the circle, we can do a 2-point option here. So we click the 2-point option there, and then we start the diameter from this point, and then we end it to this point. Very good. And now this closed curve, this circle, it also has a starting point here to the right, so we can do M for move, and space or enter to confirm, and move from that end or point to this one, the perpendicular one. Very good. And I'll click here to deselect, and if I hide the inner border layer, then we can see that this is the first circle that we would laser cut then. All right, I'll resume that, or restore the visibility of that. We can do a new layer that's called circles, and make sure that this is inside that, or resides in that layer. Change object layer. Very good. And now we can simply do like this. We don't necessarily know beforehand how many of these we will fit here, but we can, if we type distance and go from one side of the circle to the other one perpendicularly, we see that the distance of this is 111 millimeters. And then we could actually do like this. Yeah, we could either manually do a distance of here to here. I see that this is 567, and then 567 divided by 111. That's, yeah, will fit a little more than 5, but no, not more than 5 in integers. So we'll fit 5 of these. And with that information, we could actually do like this. We could create a line. I'll first click in the void to deselect, and then I'll type line here. And then we can go from this point to the other point here. Very good. And having selected that, we can type divide. This will create points along the line or the input curve that you have, dividing the curve into segments. And since there was room for 5 of these circles, then we should split them into 5 segments. So I'll simply type 5 here. Yeah, and we see that it corresponds very well with what we would expect. Now we have created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. But of course, it's too little, it's too small a margin. If we would now select this and move this from the first point to this point. Oh, sorry, having moved it, we of course moved it without retaining the original copy here. So I'll undo this with Control and Z, and then we'll simply copy it from the first point to the second point. And then space for enter to confirm. And this margin here, if we type distance from that point there, it's only 2.4 millimeters. It's way too little. So perhaps we'll do 4 instead of 5. So I'll undo the command to copy that circle, and I'll undo with Control Z the command to divide this curve, and then we'll divide it again. And we'll divide it into 4 segments this time. Very good. And we could also now make sure that if we move this circle from its center to, yeah, it might be a little hard to do this, so I'll click Escape, so as to make it more clear. If we now move the lines and the points here, and I can move it arbitrarily by simply clicking and holding the green arrow here, like this. It's still correctly positioned in the x-axis, we only just offset it arbitrarily in the y-axis. We'll use it more of a reference. And then we can actually do like this. We could move the line itself a little. And then we could create lines from point to point. And I'll do this, if you click space, you'll repeat the lastly executed command. So having already created a line, I simply click space or enter as a matter. And then point to point and space again to do another line. Very good. Because now all of these lines have a midpoint of their own. There were only 4 to create, so it was quite simple. Then we can select the circle, type M to move, and move from the center point. And here's a very nifty feature of Rhino. Now you see that we have orthographic locking or snapping already active here. As long as you make sure that the ortho is on, so that you move it orthographically. And then when you start to move it here, start to move it like this, then you can click Tab, and that will lock the direction. So now you see it doesn't change the orientation of the movement. It keeps the orientation or the direction. And now we can simply find the midpoint there. And that makes sure that we only in the x-axis, the one that we have locked the movement to, we move from the center of the original circle's location to the midpoint of the divided curve. There. And now having moved to that center there, it's very easy to copy. Now we can copy from that point, to this point, to that point, to this point. Very good. Space for enter to confirm. And then we can hide the inner border. And now we see here that we have a fairly well distributed sets of 4 circles here, with more than enough margin here to make sure that the material itself doesn't break. 31 millimeters or so. Very good. These lines can be put into another layer. Let's call a reference. Right mouse on the click and change object layer. Then we can hide it. Very good. And this is all you would need for the laser cutter. So then we can simply select this and do export. And then we'll use the same name for that. And then we make sure that this is an Illustrator file. And that makes it really, really easy to export from Rhino to Illustrator, where you can continue with the laser cutter workflow. Make sure to preserve model scale, 1mm to 1mm. Color does not matter at this stage. You will need to make sure that in Illustrator that they are 100% correct. And then we can simply click OK. Very good. That's all for this tutorial. Thank you for your time.